What's going on, guys? Mike here. Today is the day we are finally unboxing and adding the last of the main invertebrates and even some surprise fish to the Avatar tank. Now, I have to give a huge thanks to aquaticarts.com for donating these inverts. Without them, I wouldn't have been able to complete the tank. Check them out, there's a link in the description. Okay guys, let's unbox these new invertebrates and get them into their new home. I have to say, Aquatic Arts does a really good job of shipping their inverts. Look at all this packaging material. It is a little messy, but it helps to keep the temperature even, and that's super important this time of year. There's a couple of heat packs in here, really grateful for that as well. I'm gonna dig my way through here and let's grab out the first invertebrate. So right off the bat, here is probably the most controversial organism that we're gonna put in the tank. This is a dwarf Mexican crayfish, also called a CPO crayfish. Now there's a lot to talk about regarding why I picked this in particular as a tank mate, and I'll get to that soon. First, we need to float him to acclimate him to temperature, like I'm going to be doing with all of the livestock that we got in today. Also be aware that CPOs are not legal to possess in every state, so check your local laws. You guys will probably remember that I don't have a lot of space to work with here in the Avatar tank, so I'm also going to have to be floating some of the shrimp and inverts in my 90 gallon, which is at the same temperature. Next up is the female CPO crayfish that completes the mating pair that I got. I know some of you are probably thinking I'm crazy for adding these, but again, we'll talk about it soon. Next, we have a big bag here that has a few smaller bags inside of it. In here, we have the main attraction for the tank, the little Avatar warriors, which happen to be dream blue velvet shrimp. I got about 10 of these guys, and hopefully they'll end up breeding pretty quick here in their new home and catch up to the fire reds that we put in at the start. Also here we have two large bamboo shrimp. The first one here looks pretty locked up, but it turns out he's just fine after we warm him up a bit as he acclimates. My shipment did get held up an extra day due to stormy conditions somewhere in transit, which sucks, but luckily these guys all ended up okay. Whenever you're buying invertebrates or fish online, always try your best to get overnight shipping. It's spendy, but this time of the year it's especially important that you get whatever you're buying ASAP. Last, we have a few crystal reds and a few crystal blacks. So after about 20 or 30 minutes of getting them used to temperature, I sort of did a hybrid drip acclimation by adding small amounts of tank water to each bag over the course of about 2 to 3 hours. This for sure is not the best way to do this, but it ended up working just fine for me. Shrimp in particular can be a little more sensitive to differences in water parameters when moving between environments, and that's primarily why I did this. Doing something is always better than nothing. When adding new fish, invertebrates, and in certain cases even plants, you should quarantine them to prevent spreading potential diseases. I chose not to quarantine these this time because I understand those risks, and primarily, I don't have the luxury of waiting a month before I add these to the tank. With that being said, I can't recommend that you skip quarantines, guys. They're super important. The first new organisms to enter the Avatar tank were the large bamboo shrimp. These two are a lot bigger than the one that I currently have in there, but I'm super excited to watch them post up on a rock and let their fans out. We'll watch them in action later here in the video. Let's first finish up and get everybody else into the tank. Next, I added in the crystals as well as the dream blues. I can't wait to watch these shrimp find their way around the new tank and start growing their populations. Now it was time to add in the dwarf Mexican crayfish. Now, as soon as they entered the tank, almost immediately, the larger female caught and devoured an unsuspecting crystal black shrimp. Probably should have waited a little bit longer before adding the crayfish to maybe prevent this, since the new shrimp were kind of in shock from being in the new tank, but this is how we learn things. So this made me kind of freak out. I mean, these shrimp are not cheap, and obviously we don't want to have a ton of predation going on, to the point where they decimate all of the shrimp. So now I'll explain to you my plan from the start and my reasoning behind leaving these crayfish in the tank. First off, the level of aggression observed in CPOs is supposed to vary quite a bit, meaning that some crayfish will be more aggressive than others, and thus you may or may not have a problem with them attacking and eating your smaller varieties of shrimp. My idea was to have these crayfish in here basically as population control for the various dwarf shrimp. And again, this is totally an experiment. I was unsure of what would happen. Obviously, the fact that I had lost one shrimp already in literally 10 seconds was not a good sign, but I decided to stick it out and just keep a very close eye on things for the rest of the day and the next few days to follow. You can see that most of the interactions between the crayfish and the smaller shrimp are really quick ones, and only if they happen to cross paths. The shrimp quickly dart out of the way, and it doesn't look like the CPOs are actively seeking out the shrimp to attack. They just bump into each other every once in a while and scoot away, and it's all good. The male and female crayfish don't really hang out with each other, at least right now they don't. It seems like they both take on their own journey around the tank, probably just to get a sense of their new environment. There were a few times though when they crossed paths and did get a little aggressive with one another, but this was really short-lived and didn't seem like they had harmed each other at all. So now that we have our blue avatar themed shrimp in the tank, I thought to myself, what fish would be shrimp safe and look sort of like a bird? You guys probably know more about Avatar than I do, but I remembered that the blue guys rode on the bird reptile type things, and I thought about what my options could be for that. I then made a quick stop at my LFS and returned with a group of 12 marbled hatchetfish. Do you see how these could maybe pass as birds or something close to that? They spend like 99% of their time moving very slowly at the very top of the water column, and I felt like they were just the perfect fish. They shouldn't mess with any of the shrimp since they don't venture down too far, and I think they have some really great coloration and a body plan that matches what I was going for perfectly. The hatchets are prone to jumping, so I cut and added on a removable cover out of egg crate to match what was already on the tank. The leftover flake food and bloodworms that I feed these guys will end up being a good source of nutrition for the bamboo shrimp once it's been broken down into tiny bits. Again, I was trying to think all about how this system could thrive in the most natural ways. Since these fish have been introduced to the tank, I haven't had any problems with them getting along with the other inhabitants. And likewise with pretty much everyone else in this tank except the CPOs. But here's the thing. I've been doing counts on the shrimp every few days when I feed them, and numbers haven't been decreasing as far as I can tell. Every few days, maybe twice a week, I have seen the remains of a shrimp or two, but I think things are going to be okay in here shrimp population wise. I think the trick here is going to be to make sure that the crayfish are well fed. They definitely don't give up a wafer to go hunt down a shrimp, and I think that at the end of the day, as long as they're full, I won't have big problems. Another thing I've noticed is that the female crayfish, which is the larger of the two, is the only one that I've actually seen eating a shrimp. Not sure what the deal is with that, it might just be a total coincidence, but I thought it was worth a mention. Since the CPOs were added, there's been active breeding by the Fire Reds and everything is working out pretty well. The Velvet Blues haven't produced any offspring yet, but I have seen a few females with eggs, so I'm crossing my fingers that that happens soon. As long as the crayfish don't mate, then I think things will be okay. Maybe that is really my mistake, having that breeding pair, but like I said, this is just a big experiment and I'm super excited to see what will happen. Survival of the fittest is an understatement here in the Avatar tank. The bamboo shrimp are turning out to be my favorites in this tank though. I moved the power head over so it's blowing on the front of this rock here, and the shrimp pretty much never leave it. If you're unfamiliar with these big shrimp, they're filter feeders and they need to have some decent current. If I remove this pump, then at least one of them will actually crawl up into the output of the HOB to access moving water. They depend on it that much. Aquascape wise, not a ton has changed here, but I did have to replace the Monte Carlo due to melting. I had some dwarf hairgrass left in the shrimp's original tank, so I dug some out and planted it with some tweezers. I think this stuff fits the theme better. I definitely like the darker color a lot better. I'm not expecting this stuff to grow much because it's not a high-tech tank, but it should send out a few new runners pretty soon. I noticed that a few Anubias nanas and nana petites ended up with a rotting rhizome and eventually lost more than a few leaves. I'm not sure if this is because some of them became damaged from the coarse pumice or if it's something else. It didn't happen to all of the plants, just a few that were attached to the main rocks. So yeah, I think that pretty much covers it, guys. Thanks for checking out the new inverts that we put in the Avatar tank. Don't forget to leave a comment with what you think about my choices invert-wise. Subscribe if you're new, leave a like if you liked the video, and as always, we'll see you next time.